Welcome to Arash's World, where you will hear prominent voices, psychoanalysts, psychologists, therapists, philosophers, and thought leaders talk about a variety of mental health concerns and problems, including how to deal with anxiety, depression, and chronic conditions, and how to become more resilient, find inner peace, be emotionally engaged in your personal and professional life, and just be your beautiful, authentic self. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arash's World. Today we have a very special guest, Merilyn Simonds. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. How are you, Arash?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for being here on Arash's World. And the first question is the toughest, is how would you briefly describe yourself? And I know there's a lot to talk about, but the word is briefly. What would you say?
I'm more comfortable describing my book than describing me. I've been writing for a very long time, over 40 years. I published my first book in 1979 when I was 29. And I published 22 books since then in a variety of genres, from straight nonfiction to creative nonfiction, essay, memoir, short fiction, long fiction, children's book, history. Yeah, I've dabbled all over the place.
Yeah, as I was checking on your website, it's like you do everything. So that's awesome because we rarely get that. It's people usually like specialize in one thing and continue it. Some people write the same book 20 times over, but each time
No.
it's a new adventure for you.
Well, I'm a really curious person, and I don't like doing the same thing twice ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I basically follow my interests and my
Mm-hmm.
curiosity, and I develop books around whatever interests me at the moment. So
And your interest took you to Beth. So your book that we're going to
yeah,
talk about today is Walking with Beth, Conversations with My 100-Year-Old Friend.
that's right.
And a fascinating study there. But how did it come about?
So I don't care about birthdays. I never have. And in fact, um, I really like prime numbers. So sometime in my 30s, I decided I only wanted to use prime numbers. So I was 37, and then I was 41, and then I was 47, and then I was, so that's what I did, right? I would just jump from one to the other. Nobody noticed, nobody cared, but at least I got to use my prime numbers. But then when I hit 70, I felt like I was moving, into kind of uncharted territory. I knew there was lots of ageism around, and the representations of older women in movies and in most books didn't seem realistic to me. And I didn't know what to expect. My mother died in her well, she died when she was my age. Um, and so I thought, okay, who do I know who's older, who can talk to me about this? So I called up Beth, who I've known for years and years, decades. And Beth is exactly 30 years older than me. So when I was turning 70, she was turning 100. So I called her up and said, Beth, should we have a visit? She said, well, it's COVID. We really should go for a walk. So we
Mhm.
put on our masks and we went for a walk. And that was a Wednesday. And after that, we went, she said, let's do it again next Wednesday and next Wednesday and next Wednesday. And before we knew it, 3 years had passed and we had talked about everything under the sun.
Yes, yes, and that's fascinating. It is everything under the sun, and all the conversations are quite fascinating, very interesting. Before I dive into that, I just want to talk about numbers a bit. I was checking, so I love numbers. I'm not good at math, but I love numbers, and so I'm 49, and I was born in 75, and you were born in 49, and you're 75. So I thought that was
Yes,
pretty interesting.
that's very cool. I like that. That's like a palindrome. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
It's a
exactly.
palindrome, right? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Madam, my madam. Yeah.
So I love in your book how these are like snapshots of daily life, and especially you covering COVID quite well. And there's a lot that we identify with, especially having gone through that, and
Right.
also that how you kept going though, and that didn't stop you or her to have these awesome conversations. And so, what were first some of the challenges? Again, you talk about some of them in the book of like going through COVID while trying to write a book at the same time and taking a walk with your friend.
Well, yes, and especially for COVID, for Beth, COVID really hit her hard, and
Hmm.
I think that's, it hit many people hard, but I think the elderly had a special challenge because, she in the winter especially, she couldn't walk outdoors very well because you're always worried about falling. People couldn't visit her,
Hmm.
so she was very much alone through those years.
Hmm.
Um, and she and I, we walked, but it was a long time. It was at least a year before we, had the courage to actually go inside a building together.
Hmm.
We're both immune compromised, and so we had to be extremely cautious. I'm still extremely cautious around her. But yeah, COVID made life difficult for a lot of people, but it also, I think for Beth, really sort of ramped up her natural positivism and her resilience and her desire to overcome. She has this tremendous life force, I guess it is.
Hmm.
And if you put a challenge in front of her, that only ramps her up to, get over that challenge. So yeah, so she developed all these routines in her life. I was one of many friends who she would see or call or talk to every week. There was, I was Wednesday at 3. There was somebody Friday at 4 and somebody Saturday at 12:30. That's how it worked. And the other thing she did was she turned her dining room into an art studio and
Awesome.
and
Yeah.
amassed all kinds of um, materials. I mean, things that people don't even think of as art materials, but thread and stones and twigs and bits of beautiful paper and shells, anything that stimulated her and brought her joy. And she started making these collages, she called them. She had a friend cut her little blocks of wood, and she would arrange twigs and stones and paper on them. And when she was happy with the arrangement, she'd bring them over to the living room beside her chair, and she'd enjoy it for a while. And then when had another idea, she would photograph that, dismantle it, and put the materials back on the table. It's ephemeral art, which is very much a part of other cultures, but somewhat foreign to this one.
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly. And I'm just like remembering this really touching scene where you're giving her a hug, but it's not in front, it's from the back and so on. And that's very, very touching. But it's like it also shows the resilience and that we're still gonna show affection here. The COVID doesn't stop us, you know, and I love that bit.
Yes, well, and it was very poignant in the moment too. I mean, we were used to hugging and we wanted to hug. So I said, turn around, and I put my arms around her from the back so we weren't breathing on each other, and we had a back to front hug,
Yeah.
which did the trick.
The wonderful thing is you do a great job portraying her, showing her, and I love the tone throughout. It's really like warm. We feel invited, and it's poetic, but it's also simple, and that's tough for me to do because I want to impress, and then we do too much, and then I like you found I think the right tone there. And then the awesome thing is that, well, it's a real person, and we can see her pictures on her website as well. So I think that just adds the whole dimension to it. This is a living being who you talk to, so it's nonfiction in that sense.
Yes, a woman who is 105 now. She turned
Wow.
105 in July. Um, we're launching the book in Kingston, I guess in 2 weeks. and she is determined to be there. You know,
Mhm.
she still lives on her own, and she only quit driving not very long ago.
Wow.
So she's just extremely independent and
Mhm.
very, you know, she hasn't diminished mentally at all. You know,
Mhm.
physically, she's 105. She's,
Yeah.
you know, things are wearing out a little bit,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't know it. She has a very firm step and a very firm walk and a firm handshake, and yeah, she's just marvelous, really.
And there's just so much wisdom embodied in that from the experience as well as just somebody who also is curious, like yourself, I think, who thinks about things deeply and then shares it. And you shared with us through the conversations. And it's just fascinating how much you can dive into, how much stuff there is in this one person.
Well, and you know, we both love conversation, and so our conversation ranged all over the place to various artists to dance. She studied dance as a child, and she continued to dance when she was 100, or I guess in her 90s. She took up Irish dancing.
Mhm.
Um, and you know, so our conversations ranged all over the place to, you know, she was born in Kingston, and what happened to her when she moved to Toronto as an extremely young child. She was under two, and she really feels that the trauma of moving to a new place away from, there was tons of extended family in Kingston on both her mother's and father's side. Both are very old families in the area. So moved to Toronto where they didn't know anybody, and where she had a nanny who was British and, you know, different accent. And the kind of uncertainty that that creates in a child, she still feels at 105. So that when there's uncertainty, she feels that same kind of anxiety. I mean, she's an occupational therapist, and after that, an art therapist. So she's thought deeply about these things, and when she noticed it in herself, she didn't just say, "Oh my goodness, I'm anxious. I better go take a pill." She she thought, "Okay, I'm anxious. What can I do to help soothe myself and help understand what's going on?"
Mhm.
She's she's a tremendous model in that way.
Yeah, I remember years ago watching a video with Sting where he was saying like I think after age 50 he says like there's a wisdom that's kind of automatic that sets in as you grow older. And I'm not sure if I agree with him or not because it doesn't seem automatic because I know people who don't have it and they are the elderly and some who do have a lot. So I think there's also another factor that comes in, right?
I think so, because I mean, I've been around a lot of older people too, and sometimes all they want to do is look back,
Mm,
you know, and often with some bitterness and resentment that they
that's
didn't
right.
get to be what they wanted to be, or they didn't get the physical, you know, accoutrements in life that they thought they deserved. And other people are always looking forward, like, oh, when am I going to die? And what's the point of living and all that. But
Mhm.
Beth is firmly rooted in the present.
Awesome.
You know, she knows what's going on in the world. She's a, she's alive to the world,
Mhm.
um, of this moment in a
Mhm.
way that I don't know very many people who are like that of any age. But
Mhm.
she really, really exists now. And I think that's part of the secret to gathering wisdom, is that she doesn't let the present moment pass her by unnoticed and unexamined.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen that too. I joined a writers group a couple of years ago, and so all of them. I'm the youngest there, pretty much. And but I loved it because I loved interacting with them, and quite a few of them are my friends. And it was the first time where I engaged with people who are much older than myself in a continuous way. I really appreciate their sense of humor, especially, which is very
Yeah.
different.
Well, yes, and you know, and what I noticed with Beth, at least, is that there she's very open and she's never mean. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
you get to be too old to be mean. You know,
Mhm.
you know too much the kind of damage that ill-thought words can cause. And so, you know, she always says that she's part of a gratitude club,
Mhm.
that she grew up with parents who were always very grateful for what they had and you know where they were in life and the work they got to do. And she's like that, and I feel that too, that you know, the older I get, the more grateful I am for amazing friends and smart people around me and interesting people and the work that artists do that make our lives more beautiful and more meaningful.
Mhm. And that's writing. I mean, you said you've been writing for 40 years. I think it's longer than that. I think you've been writing since
It's
you were
really
much
long,
younger,
but who's
right?
counting?
So yeah, yeah, exactly, right. And I think, but that's really important to find something now, whether that's again dance or art or writing. And now, if you didn't have writing, what do you think you would have done instead
Oh
without
my,
writing?
I don't know. I've always written, you know, since I
Good.
was a little girl. I've always told stories and I've always, you know, words. I love words. I mean, I love the taste of them in my mouth, right? I
Mhm.
just love words.
Yeah.
But I also love to dance.
Mhm.
So, you know, dancing might be right up there. I also love to cook and I love to garden. So and all of those are tied together, right? In that
Mhm.
they're all sensual.
Yeah.
They all use the body, and you know, various senses. Yeah, you know, I don't think I'd be an accountant, is what I want to say.
Okay. Oh, even though you like numbers, but
I
not
do like
that much.
numbers, but you know, I like playing with them.
Yes.
I don't like being a servant to them.
That's right. That's right. Do you find it easier with time to write? Could you get into a flow much easier, or is it always challenging you find each time?
Well, for me,
Hmm.
and I know everyone's different, everyone has their own process, but for me, what I love about writing is that it throws me right back to being a 5-year-old,
Hmm.
right? When I go off on a tangent to, you know, pursue something I'm curious about, I know nothing about it. So I approach every new project like a complete neophyte. I know nothing. Um,
Hmm.
I have to learn about the world of that, and I have to then create a structure for it, you know, create characters, like whatever I do, but it's all new. And that's what keeps me going. But as a result, it's I'm learning all the time, not only the subject that I'm writing around, but I have to learn new ways of developing structure, new ways of telling a story. I've never told a story the way I told Beth's story, you know, in these small little pieces.
Hmm.
I wrote all these pieces. I think there's 95 or something in the book, and I had no idea what to do with them. So I just put them all down on the floor and I walked in around them, you know, and
That's
I
awesome.
took one and then another and then another, and that's how I got the structure. And I
It
had,
flows very nicely. Yeah.
well, there's nothing like intuition, right? Really.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what were some of the challenges here with this book in particular, would you think? I mean, just the circumstances of COVID, that's definitely one. But anything else that you found a bit challenging, maybe?
Well, you know, some of the pieces were difficult to write because
Mhm.
we talked very, very personally about
Yes.
things. I was very ill during a part of our time together that the book covers. Uh, Beth, in fact, used to pick me up and take me to the river for a picnic, and she's 30,
Mhm.
you know, she was 101 and I was 71, and she was carrying me around.
Mhm.
Um, there were definitely there were definitely challenges around being sensitive to boundaries and being sensitive to each other's personalities. and yet at the same time being absolutely honest.
Hmm.
Because I think a book like this only works if it feels honest and intimate. So what I tried to do in the book was to kind of recreate the feeling of walking and talking and the way conversation sort of builds and ebbs and flows. So it doesn't have, it doesn't have that sort of traditional arcing structure,
Hmm. Yeah.
coming to a climax and then falling off. It doesn't do that. It kind of meanders and themes enter and then leave. And I think I tell three birthday stories, not together, all in different places and for different reasons. But so, it was hard to have confidence in that kind of a structure. Um, but I hope it works.
Were there any parts that you thought like you didn't feel comfortable sharing, perhaps? Are there any parts that you omitted, perhaps, or like what? Because these are again very, very like sensitive topics, very personal things. So were you feeling like sometimes also like maybe we should not go there, or was it just like we just talk about anything?
Well, we did talk
Yeah.
about it,
Yes. Yeah.
but so I showed Beth the book. I mean, I think she read it three times.
Awesome.
Um,
What was the reaction?
she loved it. She remembered
Uh-huh.
the conversations.
Yeah.
There were some things that she felt I didn't get quite right, so we talked
Mhm.
about that until I did. So it was in that way, there was a lot of collaboration in it. And I didn't want to I didn't want to dwell on anything that she wasn't comfortable with. So
Mhm.
yes, I think about half a dozen pieces we, left on the cutting room floor.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and your own experiences too. I'm kind of interested in that. So you grew up in Brazil, and you speak Portuguese as well.
I did at the time.
Okay. Do you think that experience is also adding to your overall writing, like that, just a different perspective of different culture and language?
Absolutely. I think, well, a couple of things. For one, you know, my two older sisters went away to boarding school. My younger sister was a baby. I was seven, which is sort of just entering middle childhood. Young enough that I still had my lizard brain and I could still learn the language quite quickly, but I felt on the outside
Mhm.
of this culture. There were almost no English speaking people in the city where we lived. In fact, my father and some friends started an English language school, and there were 12 students, and that's all. And it was in a house, right? So it was this tiny, and that was 8 grades, right? 12 people in 8 grades. Um, and I think with a lot of writers, if you scratch the surface, they something in their lives, being very poor, very rich, very sick, moving, something in their lives has kind of pushed them to the sideline. So they're observing life rather than being right in the thick of it. I've known many people, and we've many writers, and we talk about this. So I think that was certainly a factor. I spent a lot of time with my books, a
Mhm.
lot of time
Mhm.
writing stories, right?
Mhm.
The other thing is exactly what you said, is that, I grew up before that. I lived in a town of 420 people in southwestern Ontario in basically Alice Munro country. And, a tiny little, very conservative village where I think half the population I was related to. And so going to Brazil, I mean, I had no idea worlds like that existed, right?
Mhm.
And it opened me up in a way that I don't think anything else would have, and gave me a love of color and a love of Latino ways of expressing oneself, Latino cadences in language, which is so different from English. Yeah, it really was pivotal for me.
Mhm. Yeah. I myself grew up in Germany. I was 7 and it was a completely new language. I couldn't communicate with anyone. And so I know exactly what that feels like. But
Yeah.
then I ended up learning the language and starting writing in it back then and in elementary school. And that's how I found words and the power of stories as well, of storytelling.
Well, and German is such an interesting language to write in because it's so close to Latin.
Mhm.
It's yes, yes. I really like German a lot. And I think being in Brazil at that particular age opened my language ear. And
Mhm.
so I pick up languages fairly relatively easily.
But again, there's the other part where you don't feel at home. You just feel like a stranger, but observing as well, but not sometimes being able to participate. And I think that gap was filled with reading, with writing, and so on. That void that we sometimes have.
Yes, exactly. I think that's, it feels lonely at the time,
Hmm.
but in retrospect, I think it was a very healthy loneliness. And
Yeah.
I learned to like being alone.
Hmm. Yeah.
I've always enjoyed being alone, and I think that's where it started. You know,
Hmm.
I yeah, I'm most comfortable writing, and I'm most comfortable alone.
And is philosophy, these philosophical musings and so on, something that comes natural to you? Have you always had that as a younger person too?
I think so. I don't think I've changed an awful lot. I think the core of a person is established fairly early.
Hmm.
And if you can remain honest with yourself, then that core um, remains as your foundation. And for me, I've always been curious, and so that curiosity of mine leads one into thinking about, well, why is it like that? How does it work? What is
Hmm.
it doing? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wonderful. So, Marilyn Simonds, your book is Walking with Beth: Conversations with My 100-Year-Old Friend. I think it really it's powerful work here because you're talking about ageism, you're talking about the power of friendship, your resilience, overcoming difficulties, but then also very importantly joy. And that joy exists in any moment of our life, and especially with your wonderful friend Beth.
That's very true. Thank you. It's lovely to meet somebody who has grasped the book so perfectly.